I'm Scott Anthony. I am the author of Smoke, Confessions of a Cuban Cigar Smuggler, and I am Chattin with Staxx.
Welcome to this episode of Chattin with Staxx. I'm your host, Bill Staxx, and today I got Scott Anthony.
Where that is like their only release, violence. And in his case, controlled violence. Not scared of it.
A lot of people don't get to control their violence, right? They let it just...
Because it also comes along with your human development. So if you're feral and you have pain and maybe add low IQ to that, you're just going to explode all the time and punch people in the face and hit them over the head with weapons. So it's that's probably why it's very important to educate our species, because education helps. And I tell kids all the time, just read a lot, reading a lot, bare minimum, you're going to grow as a person. I read a lot.
Alcohol and drugs, too, mixed in with everything is probably the worst combination ever.
I knock on wood because I've been blessed too, where like 3 drinks and my body tells me it is over for you. And I've always been like that, never overdid it. Drugs, never did it. I was always concerned with my health and well-being, but I lost more friends than I can count in the last couple of years to probably fentanyl.
Yeah, it's insane, the amount of people there.
It's scary.
In Chicago, where did your life begin? What was your life like? How did you get involved with trouble at an early age?
My father left when I was 4. He sat me on the, we sat down on my bed in our little apartment where we lived, and he put his hand on my knee, and that's all I remember. It was, goodbye. And then my mother said, your dad left, but a 4-year-old doesn't understand it. And I had a revelation this year, maybe about a year ago. My wife and I were talking, and I sat there and I said, I know where my life went, where everything changed. I had my mother's parents, my grandparents, and they were everything. They took me everywhere they went. My grandfather had a male figure. I had somebody I respected. He was an honorable citizen, and he died when I was 7. So my father left when I was 4. But I still hung on and was clinging to a normal life because I had my grandfather. My grandfather died at 7. That means the family kind of went broke. My grandmother moved in with us. And by 8 years old, at 6 or 7, I was already doing residential burglaries. The older guys, see, we had a gang right near my house, and they were the Howard Street Greasers. And this was a bunch of kids from the other side of the tracks, leather jackets, hair slicked back. Everybody was thin back then. Homemade tattoos. I had a homemade tattoo at 9. I was in a street gang, the Simon City Royals, at 9. By 14, I was the president of a branch of a street gang. I have them. I have my cards. We have these cards that you calling cards. We had sweaters with emblems and patches and T-shirts, and we graffitied on walls, and we did nothing but cause trouble.
And that was in the 60s, right? 60s, 70s?
60s, 70s, exactly. That was 1974. I was deep into it. 1974, 75, and 1974 and 75, 3 leaders of our gang all got killed. First, it was Arab. Then it was Tuffy. Tuffy was only, maybe 17 years old. And then his brother Bimbo took over. They both got killed at between 15 and 17 years old.
How'd they get killed?
Guns. We were gunplan. We were gunslingers at an early age. And people, I've got a lot of attention. Most of my followers are because of the street gangs. I was known, and I was deep into it. It was all for me. It was everything because I didn't know any better. Didn't have a father, didn't have an older brother, didn't have any cousins living there. It was my poor little mom that had to go out and make $2.30 an hour to put food on our table. My grandmother died a year after my grandfather died, and that was basically the end of any civilization that I knew of. So I hit the streets, and the older guys, that they were my heroes. Those were my examples. And it's still like that today for young men. So you want to choose carefully who they look up to. My son looking up to Dan Baziliarian isn't probably the best thing. I don't want to talk bad about Dan. I don't know him, but I could pick a handful of other examples I wish my son would have looked up to.
Yeah.
Again, I don't know Dan, and nothing, nothing on him. God bless him. You're a single guy. You want to go have fun. Hey, we all want to do that. But I lost myself to the streets, and gangs was everything. And then I had a couple mentors that were 5 years older than me. There were the TJOs, which were a really big organized gang right near me. So I knew these guys. I'm talking, the 70s in Chicago was just like New York City. You saw the movie The Warriors?
Yeah, yeah.
Very, very similar to the way we lived without the Hollywood costumes. We looked like a bunch of dead-end kids. If you saw The Outsiders,
Yeah.
that's what we looked like. That's who we were. The Warriors and The Outsiders, because The Warriors is a Hollywood production. I read the book when I was young, and it's very different. And it's the streets, and that is an education. And then my mother saved my life. She moved to a suburb. Took me a little while to acclimate, and it was almost painful. Like I had to metamorphosize to shed my skin. It was literally painful because I walked with a pimp and I spoke like a ghetto savage. Smoked cigarettes, tattoo on my arm, and all I knew was looking for an angle. And they kicked me out of the normal schools. And then I lived in an orphanage for 2 years, Angel Guardian Orphanage in Chicago. They took my sister and myself away from my mother. She didn't know what to do. God bless her soul. She had no clue. Kids didn't act that way when she was coming up. All these bad kids schools had the worst kids.
Yeah.
So I just met the next guy to look up to, and the bar just kept getting raised. And I went to different neighborhoods around, and I was so used to black kids at an early age. To me, there was no line with race. I hung out with everybody, and I was just as bad, wild, and tough as any of them. It didn't matter. None of that mattered to me. And then one day, I saw this beautiful woman at the bad boy school, and I just watched her go by, and I'm like, who is that? And they said, that's the psychologist. And I said, oh, wow, the psychologist. Next day, I'm in her office for therapy, and I'm just looking, and she showed me a whole nother life. She had friends that went to the gym and worked out. They owned companies. They went to universities. She would invite me to barbecues with real humans. And I would look around. In my neighborhood, there were a lot of dudes that were like 6'2" on a little kid's bicycle. That was their main transportation. When you see anybody who's older than 22 years old and their main transportation is a BMX, but not the brand, not a good quality bike. I'm talking, a little kid's bike.
Yeah.
He fucked up somewhere along the way.
100%.
And so I looked at that. Then I would go back to the corner from her people, and I'd go to my neighborhood. And then I'm looking at all the guys, and I'm starting to see the light and going, like my hero was this guy named Whacker. He was 6'4", 120 pounds wet when I met him. And he'd already done a tour in the penitentiary. And then in my lifetime, he was still my friend up until a few years ago. He passed away. He did 38 years of prison time in 57 years of life.
Wow.
very little time on the outside. And this was my mentor. These were the people teaching me. But I could see the light, and I would pull away and I would come back. I'd pull away. And when my mother moved to the suburbs, I remember, I don't know what the coach saw in me, but he hit me up in a hall. He goes, "Hey man, you ought to wrestle." And I said, "Wrestle?" And he's like, "Yeah." So that I started wrestling. And then I got really good at wrestling really fast. And then I went into Chicago to the Park District, and I boxed and competed. And then the day I saw kickboxing, I said, I was kickboxing in the street since I was 9. So to do it in the ring with pillows, it was just the best thing I could have found. And I graduated high school with honors, which was amazing. But I robbed my first drug dealer 6 months before graduation. I was 17 and a half years old, and my destiny came calling.
Why did you do that?
Because I was from the streets and it was money. 2 other guys, we went to this guy's house to buy some stuff. We had back then they used Quaaludes. And we had some girls, and it was a hot summer night. My friend who worked at a restaurant, he knew of this guy. The restaurant community is really plugged in, right? They all know each other at the clubs, and they know all the gossip. And so we went to this guy, bought the Quaaludes, and I mentioned it to a couple of my street buddies, like, I don't know, a month later. They're like, "Let's get him. Come on, let's go take his shit." And I was like, "No, I don't want to get in any trouble." I had 2 felonies pending already, so I was no angel, but I was fighting. I always say I have 2 angels. I have 2 devils on one shoulder and 1 angel on the other, and they're constantly fighting. And the angel is whispering, he's saying, "Don't listen to him." And they're over there going, "Fuck him. Let me over there. I'll knock him right off of there." And then he's saying, "Please, don't listen." And it's been this war since an early age because I want to be a good person. But then they pushed it enough to where I said, "Okay." And Wacker would call me from prison almost every day. And I told him, "Wacker, I got this guy I'm setting up." And he said, "Okay, you're the lead on this, little buddy. So when you get in there, you take him in the bedroom, you put a pillow over his head, and you take him out." He said, "Now the pillow's going to start on fire. So you got to make sure you put that pillow out real quick." So those were my mentors.
So that's what he told you to do?
That's what he told me to do. He was disappointed with me because I didn't do it.
So walk me through what happens when you walk in the house.
Well, nobody can understand it unless they've done it. I did. There's 32 of those in my 3rd book. 32 of those that I narrate, including an armored car robbery and a South American kidnapping. Look, I'll give you a little explanation. The other day, friend of mine, good friend, he was the one who introduced me to this guy in the beginning. You can tell a lot about a person who has friends for their whole life. When you meet somebody and all their friends are new, you got to question yourself and go, I've had friends since I was 4 years old, still my friends. And we were talking, and he's doing very well, and he's investing. I said, "You know what, Mac?" I said, I really don't like taking risks. And he laughed for about 20 minutes straight. I said, "I mean financial risks. If I got my money, I don't like putting it in somebody else's hands to decide. So I've never invested in anything." And he laughed about the risk. I had a lot of balls. And when you are kicking in a drug dealer's door, you have no idea what's on the other side. Some of them, many of them, because I come from there, they sit on the other side with a gun in their lap. A lot of street people actually have guns in their laps. And if they're using blow at the time, if they're all geeked out, they're paranoid. So they're listening for things that don't even exist.
Yeah.
So always dangerous. But if you seen the movie Town with Ben Affleck?
Yeah.
That was a version. That was like a percentage of me. I was very strategic and planned really well. because everybody who I pulled into it with me and I trained, I said, no violence. Violence brings cops. Cops, if you are a violent criminal, you are in their sights faster than you can imagine because the cops just don't want violence running around. But when you're not doing crazy, stupid, they go, okay, this guy's calculated. I would love to see my FBI file. I know it's over 400 pages. So I was very careful about it. And what you feel, sometimes I used to have to watch movies with a lot of shootouts in it because it's when things happen like this, you don't have time to think. I've been in many situations. It just happens and you get out of it. And I'm fortunate. But when you're planning, now the nerves build up. Now you have the cortisone being released in your body, and you're like this because the whole plan. You're not only worrying about the job that you're focused on. You got to worry about the cops, and the cops aren't just if the cops come, it's the consequences of what happens afterwards. And in my third book, I have the Illinois statute for home invasion. Home invasion was 6 to 30 years. And if you do a armed home invasion, you're looking at 15 to 30 easy. And if there's any blood, any violence, you're getting 30 years. So that was every single day of my life. And then what that led to is the obvious, well, I've got product. Now I've got to get rid of my product. How do you get rid of the product? You got to sell it. So then then I built a clientele base. So before long, I've got a whole network, and I was I guess very fortunate that my brain worked well. I studied, I educated myself, and I had a couple angels that passed through my life that without them I wouldn't be here.
So you end up getting that guy, right?
That was the first guy, 17 and a half years old. We got all his stuff, and he was big. In that was October of 1981 when we got him, and he had a full kilo of cocaine. They were about 90 grand then. He had a full kilo of heroin.
Wow.
Several kilos of Afghan hash because it was stamped. It had this stamp in there. A full massive bale of weed. They came in Marlboro cigarette boxes, these big, huge boxes, and MDA, which was probably, like ecstasy powder back then, and Quaaludes and downers and speed and all this stuff, different stuff. And he hunted us.
You weren't worried about the people he was getting it from or had to give the money to?
I was, because when he was tied up on his floor, he said, you don't know what you're doing. You don't know what's going to happen to you. You're young. You're making a terrible mistake. And my friend Mac worked at a restaurant. This guy had us ID'd because when I went to his house, he said to me, hey, you're the chef at Ambria, right? And I said, yeah, but it was actually my friend that worked at Ambria restaurant. And they showed up at Ambria and they went to go get this guy. But at that time, we knew these mobsters that were doing gambling, and we knew one of the ladies that rented apartments, and they used us to rent their apartments. You get a clean cut, college looking kid to go and rent an apartment. And then the mob would set up full of phones, and they used flash paper back then. They would have buckets next to the ladies, and, we'd fix up all the locks on I'd have to get them the apartment and all the phones and everything. So I knew the inner workings. Plus, since I rented it, I had keys, and I would use them to bring girls to the apartments at night because they only worked in the daytime. No bad business at night. So when they went to the restaurant to get Mac, some thugs showed up, and he said, wait a minute, I got someone to vouch for me. And he called this woman, and she called the mobster, and then the mobster told her, tell him this. So he was protected. So they took him from there, and they took him back to the house that we did the home invasion on. And they sat him down, and there were two guys next to him and a couple guys in front of him. And he said right there, he said, I thought I was dead. He said, I was just waiting for him to choke me from behind. And they said to him, we know it's not you. That was my first one. I didn't wear a mask. After that, I got very proficient. I learned as a criminal, in order to survive, you must learn, you must develop and get better. So he got out of there and he called me up and he said, you got to give it back. These guys, this is the real deal. I said, I'm the real deal too. Come and get me.